Hello and welcome to World Talks on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. In Oslo, this year's Nobel Peace Prize ceremony unfolded without its laureate. Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Machado, forced into hiding after a disputed election and barred from travel, was prevented from attending, echoing the absence of Poland's Lech Wałęsa in 1983 under communist rule. Machado's daughter accepted the prize, delivering a message of hope for a democratic Venezuela. As authoritarian governments try to silence dissenting voices, what does this moment reveal about today's global struggle for freedom? Well, to explore this, we're joined by Rafał Pankowski, his co-founder, Never Again Association. Mr. Pankowski, welcome to TVP World. Thanks for taking the time.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening. So what do we know? Because there have been reports that Maria Machado is actually going to arrive in Oslo, but just a little bit later than the ceremony concludes. Is that what you've heard, or is there an update to that?
Mm-hmm. Well, like you said, I think many of the reports so far have been even conflicting. Some of them claimed Mrs. Machado was on her way to Norway. Some of them said she was already in Norway, but did not participate in the ceremony. But I think those details might not be even so important. Of course, what matters is the more general symbolism of the ceremony, and of course the global political context.
Right. Tell me about the symbolism of the ceremony when it comes to the people in Venezuela, the opposition in Venezuela. What does it mean to them?
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, every time the Nobel Peace Prize is awarded, this is a big event, and especially in the context of the country where the laureate comes from, in this case Venezuela, and of course this is broadly perceived as a as a big boost to the political opposition to the dictatorship in Venezuela, and no doubt about that. But at the same time, of course, we have a more global context, and in this case, I think the decision to award the Nobel Peace Prize, it was also very much related to the issue of who is not awarded the Peace Prize, namely Donald Trump. And I think, nobody seriously could expect that, but some Trump supporters and possibly Donald Trump himself really expected to be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. So this aspect of the decision is important too. And I think in a way that creates a certain inconvenient situation for Mrs. Machado herself, because in the context of international politics, she has often been seen as a figure not so far for the international right-wing network of which Donald Trump is a figurehead.
Yes, but when she was awarded it, she dedicated it to President Trump. What do you think that meant?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it is a certain paradox because, of course, on the one hand, the Nobel Peace Prize is a symbol of the global peace movement and its tradition, as well as the international human rights movement, as well as the values that those movements represent. On the other hand, the right-wing network that I mentioned, of which both Trump and Machado seem to be parts of, is actually a far cry from the values and the discourse of the human rights movement as we have known it for decades. So I think there is a certain there is a certain paradox. There is a certain tension between those different types of tradition, different types of values and discourses that are represented here.
Right. Okay. Now, Ms. Machado has been in hiding since January of this year, so a full year. She was last seen at a protest. How precarious is her situation in Venezuela, and how did she make it out, if she did?
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, the regime in Venezuela has become increasingly authoritarian and oppressive over the years. When it started in the first period, we could debate whether or not it represented some, genuine popular popular demands for justice, but it really became oppressive, and I think Ms. Machado represents the counter movement trying to check the sort of slippery road to authoritarianism in Venezuela, and there has been much speculation about her sort of personal safety, and especially vis-a-vis the Nobel Peace Prize, which usually helps those dissidents and opposition figures who are challenging their oppressive regimes.
Okay, now I'd like to remind viewers that in 1983 something very similar happened to Lech Wałęsa when he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, but he was not allowed to leave Poland to collect it. What other parallels can you see between Lech Wałęsa's situation and that of Maria Machado?
Mm-hmm. Well, absolutely. Of course, here in Poland, we think back to the year when Lech Wałęsa was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize as the leader of Solidarity, a very huge and a very large social movement associated with the ideas of human rights and a peaceful movement, which is important to stress. In the case of Lech Wałęsa, I think it was actually not so much the case of communist authorities trying to prevent him from accepting the award personally, but there was also an element of hesitation on his part whether or not he would be allowed back to Poland, and he did not want to become an exile. And he wanted to stay in Poland and lead the movement to victory, which he eventually did. So in this case, it was his wife and I think one of his sons who accepted the award on his behalf. And I think especially the fact of his wife Danuta accepting the prize sort of leads us to or reminds us of some of the debates, especially in the last years, about the role of women in the solidarity movement, as well as in the international movements for human rights and for peace, which is something we often tend to forget, unfortunately.
Right. Now, here we have two situations where authoritarian governments or the opposition to those governments have, representatives have been awarded Nobel Peace Prize. How embarrassing is this for those authoritarian leaders? And do you think it might shift the needle as it did in Poland? Do you think a similar thing might happen in Venezuela?
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, every time this decision is significant, both in the international context, which I think is particularly important in the case of Venezuela, but also the domestic context of every country that is relevant here. I think in the case of Poland, if we think of the history of Poland, it still took another 7 years before Solidarity emerged as the successful movement which removed the dictatorship in Poland through a process of peaceful transition. So I think the effect of a Nobel Peace Prize cannot be the impact cannot be dismissed. But also, I think we should not overstate it. The impact is not overnight; it's not immediate, and of course, it is just one of the factors that that determine the success of a movement like the Solidarity movement in Poland. Well, it is important. It is significant.
Well, of course, that makes perfect sense. However, with Poland in particular, and now with Venezuela, what we have seen, of course, is the eyes of the world on the countries, right? Which clearly must add some energy to the momentum towards political change, mustn't it?
Well, of course, yes. At the same time, I think a question could be asked whether or not the recent statements and actions of President Trump are actually helping vis-a-vis potential peaceful democratic change in Venezuela, and the threat of military action against Venezuela from the US may or may not actually help the democratic opposition within Venezuela. And I think, the reasons are obvious.
Right. Well, Rafał Pankowski, thank you very much for breaking that down for us. And have a lovely evening. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Brings us to the end of this episode of World Talks. Don't go away, news coming right up. Bye for now.